We who are born of the planet, with her we speak. Her flesh is our flesh, her voice the wind. To her we return, and in her we find rest. This is what remains of Cetra poetry. Fragments preserved in ancient temples, half remembered by a world that no longer understands what it means. Most people hear these words and think, religion, mysticism, ancient people worshipping nature as primitive cultures do. They're wrong. This isn't religion. It's biology and memory working together. The Cetra didn't worship the planet. They were in conversation with it. Their flesh was literally shaped by the world, born from life stream energy, sustained by it, designed to sense and respond to it. And when they died, they didn't ascend to some celestial heaven. They reintegrated into the life stream, the true promised land. Not a place, a state of being. The Cetra were participants in a living system, not mystics floating above it, not separate from nature, observing it from the outside. They were part of the mechanism, neural tissue in a planetary nervous system. And for thousands of years, that system worked. This is the story of how it broke. How a civilization built on listening was destroyed by something that weaponized trust. How trauma cascaded through generations until the planet itself learned to be afraid. This is the story of the first apocalypse, and why it never really ended. In the last video, we explored the life stream as the planet's memory, how every life returns to it, and how that memory shapes the world. But memory doesn't just preserve life, it preserves trauma. To understand why the planet learned to defend itself, we have to go back to the first time it was wounded. Let's cut through the misconceptions immediately. The Cetra, also called the Ancients, looked exactly like humans. No wings, no glowing eyes, no ethereal features or divine markings. If you passed a Cetra on the street, you wouldn't know it. Their difference wasn't physical, it was relational. The Cetra were born of the planet with an innate ability to commune with the life stream. They could sense its flow, the way you might sense temperature or pain. They could hear the planet speak, not in words, but in sensations, needs, warnings. This ability was genetic, passed down through bloodlines, but it wasn't magical in the fairy tale sense. It was attunement, a neurological adaptation that allowed them to perceive something most humans couldn't. Think of it like perfect pitch, but for planetary health. You can't learn it if you're not born with it, and if you are born with it, ignoring it is nearly impossible. The Cetra could sense where the life stream flowed freely and where it stagnated, where land was wounded and where it thrived, where the planet needed intervention and where it needed to be left alone. And here's the crucial distinction that defines everything about Cetra culture. They didn't control the planet, they listened and responded. Control implies dominance, hierarchy, one entity imposing will on another. The Cetra's relationship with the planet was collaborative. The planet would communicate needs. This area is dying. This region needs cultivation. This place requires healing. And the Cetra would travel there and do the work. Not because they were commanded, because they understood their role in the system. They were caretakers, gardeners on a planetary scale, interpreters translating the planet's needs into action. And that brings us to the defining feature of Cetra civilization, migration. The Cetra were nomadic, constantly traveling, never settling permanently in one place for more than a season or a generation. This wasn't romantic wanderlust. It wasn't spiritual seeking or cultural preference. It was necessity. The planet's needs weren't static. Ecosystems shift, climates change, land becomes exhausted in one region and fertile in another. The life stream flows unevenly, concentrating in some areas while withdrawing from others. The Cetra followed those flows. They traveled to places where the planet called them, cultivated life, opened life stream veins to heal damaged land and make it fertile, then moved on when the work was done. This is why Aerith Church can bloom in the middle of Midgar, a steel city built over poisoned soil where nothing should grow. That flower bed exists because Cetra knowledge once shaped that land. Because centuries ago someone attuned to the planet stood in that spot and helped life take root. The flowers remember, even if the people don't. Cetra migrations weren't about conquest or expansion. They didn't claim territory. They didn't build permanent cities or establish kingdoms. Their settlements were temporary, structures designed to be assembled, used, and dismantled without scarring the earth. This was stewardship in motion, a civilization that measured success not in what it accumulated, but in what it left behind. Land healthier than they found it, ecosystems more balanced, the life stream flowing more freely. This is the world before extraction, before the idea that land exists to be owned, before humanity learned to take without giving back. For thousands of years, this system sustained both the Cetra and the planet, a perfect symbiosis. And then the sky fell. Around 2,000 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII, something struck the northern continent, a meteorite, massive, traveling through space at incomprehensible speed until it found a living world. The impact carved the North Crater, an open wound in the planet, so catastrophic that it would never fully heal. The shockwave was planetary, the devastation immediate, but the physical destruction was just the beginning. Inside that meteor was something alive, something adaptive, something that didn't belong to any system the planet had evolved to defend against. The being was telepathic. It could read memories and emotions, scanning the minds of those it encountered with surgical precision. It could see your deceased loved ones in your thoughts, their faces, their voices, the exact way they made you feel. And then it would become them. It didn't arrive like an army. It arrived like someone you loved, standing where they shouldn't be. To understand why Jenova's method was so effective, and why its influence never truly ended, you have to understand what it really is. Not just a creature, but a system of propagation. That's something we'll break down fully in another video. This is crucial to understand. Jenova didn't attack bodies first. It attacked identity. A Cetra healer would encounter what appeared to be their mother, dead for years, now somehow returned, injured and calling for help. The recognition would be perfect, the mannerisms exact, every detail flawless. And in the moment of embrace, Jenova would infect them. The infection rewrote biology at the cellular level. Strange lesions would appear on the skin, subtle at first, then spreading. Behavioral changes would follow. Aggression, paranoia, gradual loss of self. The body was still there, but the person inside it was already disappearing. And then transformation. The infected would become monsters under Jenova's control, spreading the infection to others while their consciousness dissolved into nothing. But the true horror wasn't the physical mutation, it was the psychological collapse. How do you maintain a civilization built on trust when anyone you meet might be Jenova wearing a familiar face? How do you offer aid, the core value of Cetra culture, when compassion becomes the vector for infection? The Cetra called it the calamity from the sky because it ended the world they knew, not through superior force, not through military conquest, but by turning their greatest strength, connection, into their greatest vulnerability. Jenova used memory, grief, and familiarity as weapons. Infection followed manipulation. The apocalypse wasn't loud at first. It was intimate. Village by village, family by family. The Cetra civilization collapsed from within. A small group of survivors eventually managed to seal Jenova at the North Crater, using the concentrated life stream energy the planet was channeling to heal the wound. They entombed the calamity in ice and geological strata, buried so deep it should have stayed hidden forever. But the damage was done. Most of the Cetra were dead. Their knowledge was fragmenting. Their connection to the planet was traumatized. And the planet itself learned a terrible lesson. Listening is not enough. Sometimes threats come from outside the system. Sometimes trust is weaponized. Sometimes survival requires not openness, but containment. The planet would never be the same, and neither would the Cetra. After the calamity, things don't stabilize. They get worse. The Gi tribe arrives, beings who can communicate, who appear intelligent and organized, but who fundamentally don't belong to the planet's cycle. When the Gi die, their souls cannot return to the life stream. Something about their nature, their origin, their composition, the way they're structured, makes them incompatible with the planet's memory system, They're trapped, aware, unable to move on, unable to dissolve into the greater whole, just stuck, conscious and suffering in a way the planet was never designed to accommodate. And in their resentment, in their isolation, they create something catastrophic. The black materia, not a weapon in the traditional sense, a weaponized rejection of the planet's cycle itself. Materia that, when activated, calls Meteor, a celestial body massive enough to wound the planet so severely that the resulting damage would be existential. The logic is brutal. If we cannot join the cycle, we will end it. The surviving Cetra recognize the danger immediately. They hide the black materia away in the Temple of the Ancients, sealing it with mechanisms only someone who can hear the planet could navigate. But the precedent is set. The knowledge exists. The possibility is proven. Here's the thematic beat that matters. Every apocalypse teaches the planet to be more afraid. First Jenova, then the Gi. Each trauma compounds the last. Each crisis shows the planet that threats can come from anywhere. From the sky, from incompatible life forms, from those who reject the cycle itself. The planet begins developing defenses. The weapons are born from this trauma, living constructs designed to eliminate existential threats. Not born of malice, but of repeated injury. The planet is learning to fight back, but the Cetra are running out of time. Before we continue, it's worth recognizing how easily knowledge can be lost, or rewritten entirely, because the next disaster wasn't an alien invasion. It was the consequence of something that couldn't return to the planet at all. Now we need to address something Sephiroth claims in the game and clarify what's actually true. Humans didn't replace the Cetra. Humans are what happens when Cetra stop listening. This is critical. At some point, whether before Jenova arrived or after the trauma it caused, some Cetra made a choice. They stopped following the planet's call. They stopped traveling. They chose permanent settlements, stability, convenience, a life where they could build homes that lasted, grow food in the same fields year after year, raise children without constant migration. And in making that choice, over generations, they slowly lost the ability to hear the planet. The connection atrophied, not immediately, not in a single generation, but gradually, like a muscle that stops being used. Children born to settlers heard the planet more faintly than their parents. Their children heard it even less. Within a few generations, the voice was gone entirely. This wasn't evil, it was survival after trauma. After Jenova, after the Gi, after watching their civilization nearly destroyed by threats they couldn't anticipate, can you blame some Cetra for wanting walls? For wanting permanence? For choosing not to migrate into danger? But once people stop listening, the planet becomes silent. And silence invites misunderstanding. Without the ability to hear the planet, humans began to see it differently. Not as a living system they participated in, but as an environment to be managed, resources to be used, land to be owned. The relationship shifted from collaboration to extraction. And that shift, that fundamental change in how humanity related to the world, set the stage for everything that would follow. Shinra didn't invent exploitation. They inherited a world where the planet was already silent. They just industrialized what was already happening. Over time, the divide between Cetra and humans widened. Jealousy developed. The Cetra could still do things humans couldn't: locate resources, heal land, commune with something greater. That difference bred fear, and fear breeds violence. Humans began hunting the Cetra, not in organized campaigns, but in scattered acts of brutality, burnings, murders, communities razed because they were other. The Cetra themselves believed this violence was influenced by Jenova's lingering corruption, that the calamity had left something behind in the life stream, a paranoia, a distrust, a tendency toward elimination of the different. Whether that's true or just tragic human nature, the result was the same. The Cetra went into hiding. Their numbers dwindled. Knowledge faded into fragments. Poems carved in temple walls. Rituals no one fully understood anymore. Half-remembered legends passed down through bloodlines that were slowly going extinct. By the time Shinra Electric Power Company rose to dominance, the Cetra were already ghosts, myths, archaeological curiosities, and Shinra did what corporations do. They commodified the memory. This is where remake-era lore becomes particularly sharp. Shinra doesn't just extract Mako, they extract meaning. They rewrite history to justify their extraction. In Remake, Shinra presents itself as the inheritor of Cetra wisdom. They create VR exhibits showing ancient Cetri, using the planet's energy, carefully edited to make stewardship look like consumption. They position themselves as the spiritual successors to a lost civilization. The propaganda is subtle but devastating. They show Cetra harnessing lifestream energy, quietly rewriting caretaking into resource management. They frame migration as primitive wandering that Shinra's technology has rendered obsolete. The message is clear. What the Cetra did through ignorance, Shinra does through enlightenment. We're not destroying the planet. We're fulfilling the ancients' legacy. The irony is brutal. Shinra doesn't succeed the Cetra. It replaces them by doing the exact opposite of what they stood for. The Cetra listened. Shinra takes. The Cetra migrated to heal. Shinra drills to extract. The Cetra returned to the cycle. Shinra burns it as fuel. Every piece of Shinra propaganda is a lie wrapped around a deeper lie. And most people believe it because there's no one left to contradict them. Except one. Ifalna was among the last pure-blood Cetra. Aerith, her daughter, born from Ifalna and Professor Gast, a human, is half Cetra. Possibly the last who can truly hear the planet. But here's what's crucial about Aerith. She isn't powerful because of blood alone. Genetics gave her the potential, but she's powerful because she still listens. She tends flowers in a church in Sector 5. She talks to them. She knows when the planet is hurting. She can sense the life stream crying beneath Midgar's reactors. But when she admits she doesn't know how the Cetra used to pray, that the rituals are lost, that she's improvising based on fragments Ifalna taught her, it's devastating. Not because the ritual is lost, but because the relationship is. Aerith isn't performing ceremonies passed down through millennia. She's trying to rebuild a conversation from broken pieces. She's the last speaker of a language no one else remembers, trying to translate the planet's needs into words the world might understand. She carries the weight of an entire civilization's knowledge in fragments, and she knows it's not enough. She knows she's missing pieces that were lost when her mother died, when the Cetra before her were erased. But she listens anyway, because that's what Cetra do, even when they're the last one left. Here's the reframing that matters. The Cetra didn't disappear. They dissolved into humanity. Their bloodline didn't end. It diffused, diluted across generations, scattered through populations, until the ability to hear the planet became so faint that no one recognized it anymore. But the instinct remains. The urge to travel, to explore, to protect, to connect with something larger than yourself. These aren't new impulses. They're echoes of the Cetra that still exist in human DNA. Cloud's journey across the planet. The party's fight against Genova. The struggle over the planet's future. These aren't new wars. They're the continuation of the first apocalypse. The same conflict the Cetra fought 2,000 years ago. Can life that listens to the planet coexist with forces that see it as a resource? The Cetra failed not because they were wrong. They failed because the universe changed. Because something came from outside their system and weaponized the very things that made them who they were. But the war isn't over. It just has new participants. And the planet never forgot. It remembers every Cetra who returned to the life stream. Every lesson learned through trauma. Every apocalypse that taught it to defend itself. The planet is still listening, still hoping someone will listen back. Because the calamity that destroyed the Cetra was never truly gone. It adapted, it waited, and it learned how to survive inside the very system it once tried to destroy. Genova was never just a disaster, it was an intrusion into the planet's memory itself. And thousands of years later, its influence is still shaping the fate of the world. If you want to understand what Jenova really is, and why it may be the most dangerous entity in Final Fantasy VII's world, you need to see what it becomes next.